welcome back to another sewing video. I've slowly been gathering a collection of button-up tops just because I find that they're always abundant at secondhand shops or thrift stores or on Marketplace or wherever you find them. There's always so many fun different patterns and fabrics and shapes and little details that you can work with. I also find that they are a perfect base for a thrift flip project. I thought this could be the beginning of a fun series where we work on leveling up button-up shirts. Maybe we share ideas in the comments and I can work on it and see how it goes. Let me know below if you've got any links to inspirations or ideas that you've had on your mind of pieces that you're like, oh wow, that could be a perfect thrift flip from a button-up shirt. I've got 2 ideas that I know I'm gonna get to, maybe a third if I have enough time. But the first one I know I really want to try is, I love the boxy button-up fit as it is. I just feel like it would be nice to extend it and turn it into a dress. And what I'm thinking is cutting it at a midpoint, probably like just below my bust or around my waist area, and adding an extra strip in, as well as maybe some final edging details on the bottom. I'll see how much length I need to add onto them. But instead of just adding regular material, I've got some trimming pieces of lace, embroidery on glaze, I guess like crocheted knitted pieces. I feel like this could be a nice element to add in, keeps it exciting, and it looks like an intentional design decision rather than just like an extra panel randomly added in. The next one is adding some drawstring features. I have added some drawstring features to the front of a top before, so I'll show you the process of how in general the drawstring feature is added, and then you can use your sweet imagination and add it to wherever you would like on the top. It could be the sides, the center vertical, center horizontal, sleeves. I think that's the top 2 I'm going to get to. And then I've got some other ideas. Speaking of coming up with all the ideas for this series, I'd like to say a massive thank you to the sponsor of today's video, which is Milanote. Their amazing platform has actually helped me crystallize a few of the ideas that I had in mind, and I'll talk you through how. If you haven't heard of Milanote before, it's an amazing digital tool that's perfect for organizing creative projects, and it's been such a game changer for me. Normally I get overwhelmed with my overflowing screenshots, notes, and other doses of inspiration scattered around everywhere and not thoughtfully organized. But with the help of Milanote, I can now keep everything visually inspiring and easily accessible all within the one spot. So here's how I'm using it. I've created a leading board where all of my sub boards for upcoming projects live. As I click into each of these, I can then start to see how I've individually fleshed out my plans of bringing this idea to life. Milanote's visual interface lets me drag and drop images, color palettes, links, notes, tasks, sketches, fabric swatches, and so much more all in one place. It's like having a giant and interactive corkboard right on my screen. Whether you're a fashion designer, hobby sewist, or a garment maker, Milanote makes starting a new project easy with over 100 built-in templates available for every type of creative project. I love that I can tailor the boards to best suit how I'm going to approach the creation of a garment. Because I'm working with an existing thrifted item for this project, I've created separate boards for each design idea, whereas with other sewing projects where I'm starting from scratch, I could create sub-boards for each stage of the project, from inspiration to sourcing, making, and final styling ideas. As I gather more inspiration and refine my ideas, I can easily rearrange things and see everything come together visually. It's super satisfying to see the concepts take shape and helps keep me on track with my project. Also, I've got some future thrift flip collab projects coming up, so when that comes around, I'll easily be able to invite collaborators to be able to contribute with comments and editing of the board. This way we can keep up to date with what stage we're up to and what tasks we each need to be focusing on in real time. If you're a fellow visual planner like myself, either for your at-home projects or even for your workplace, then Milanote is definitely worth checking out. It's helped me stay organized and super inspired throughout this project, and best of all, Milanote is available for free with no time limit. I'll drop a link for it in the description box of this video if you want to try it out for yourself. Thanks so much again for Milanote for sponsoring this video, and now let's get back into customizing these thrifted button-ups. Obviously the whole basis of this project is to do with button-up tops, so find one, whether it is in your existing wardrobe, a thrifted piece, your parents' wardrobe, that is up to you where you source it from. I have got this one which has no sleeves, I have other ones which have sleeves, long sleeves, short sleeves. That is totally up to you and what you find and what you prefer. And also just thinking about the fit and how you would like to customize it. It could be a good opportunity if you have something that is maybe a bit tight and small. This is your time to be able to expand it and add elements to it to make it fit better. Or if you have something like some of these are for me, just a little bit oversized, then it might allow for the gathering of areas. So just keep that in mind when you're searching. Either go into it with the intention and the outcome, or maybe base the project off the shirt that you have available. If you end up being inspired by this and you want to recreate concept 1, all you'll need is some fabric chalk, measuring tape, some fabric scissors, some matching thread to your thrifted garment or your accessory pieces, and then figuring out what panels and details you would like to add to the center, the bottom, the sleeve edges. I've got this thicker embroidery on glaze strip, which I think will be perfect for the center. I've just gone for this because it matches the material. Of course, you can experiment with contrasting colors, contrasting details. I wanted this to kind of all blend in and go with the white, whereas I've got another one where I've gone with more of like an off-white to go with the pattern. I've got this thicker strip to go ideally in the middle and add some length. I then picked up these extra pieces just so I could have them and to see if they would come into play. Where I'm going to start is figuring out where I want to cut the line. Ideally, because this is a little bit see-through, I don't want it to be showing my undies or my bra line. This is where you could really have fun with your customizing. You could do angles and then straighten it out in the back, cut it vertically as well and add strips to make it wider, whether you want that down the center or even down the side seams. The basis of what I'm going to show you, you can pretty much do on any angle in any position. If I measure from my shoulder down to below my bust area, that's 15 inches. So that's I think where I would roughly like this to be. You can try it on or you can just measure it out. So 15 inches from the top of the shoulder, pop a mark there. And then I can just go between it to create a straight line. Figuring out a position in between the button areas as well. Ideally, you want it to be offset a little bit so when you do lose a bit of seam allowance, you're not then losing a whole buttonhole. So where I've put that, it's kind of close to that button. So I might even shift it up just a little bit. So then that gives me a bit of space so I don't lose the button. So once I've got that all marked out, I can just trim across. I'm just gonna do the top and the bottom layer all in the one go. Just make sure that everything is nice and aligned, that the armholes are sitting on top of each other. The bases are sitting together. It might be nice to even button it up so that's all sitting where it's meant to be, and then just trim away. It equally excites me and overwhelms me the amount of variations you can create to suit your style or like your preferences, or how one little thing can make it look so different. I personally am into the idea of having the inserted section in the center, whereas you could go with more of like a drop waist style and put it lower, or even experiment with doing it higher. That might just change the armholes a bit. That could be cute. Now I'm going to experiment with laying this out and figuring out my plan of attack. I think I'm going to unpick that pocket just because I might add this detail, one of the ribbony pieces down the center, and then put this over the top of it potentially. Have the frill down the bottom. As well, if you find that these little sections aren't adding the extra length that you need, you could also double it up or even do multiple sections. This clearly has a good and bad side, so I'm going to lay majority of the strap good side facing down and align it to the center of the shoulder section, and then I'll just end up sewing pretty much exactly where that seam is of the shoulder, and then I'll do the next step. So once I've sewn that line across there, I'll trim off any excess seam allowance just so there's less bulkiness that I need to hide. And then now when I go to unfold it, it means there'll be a clean edge that aligns with the shoulder seam. It kind of looks like it's just coming out of the shoulder seam. Lay this all good sides facing up. Find where I would like that to continue down the front. I benefit here because I've got some indicators from the pattern of the embroidery anglaise. And I'm going to start at the top, sew down one edge, and then probably just go back to the top and sew down the other edge. This depends on the type of like ribbon or material or whatever you're adding on. Obviously this is so optional. I feel like it'll just enhance the design. Some of them, even just a line down the center will be enough, and you can have the edges sitting up, but I think I want the ribbon to be kind of free. Wow. Little cute strips have been added to the center of the front panels. There's multiple ways that we could add this into this section. It just depends on the vision that you have for the garment and the details that you prefer. I'm actually going to attach this in two different ways just so you can see it. I'm going to go around all these raw edges and just zigzag stitch, or if you have an overlocker or serger, you can serge them. I just want to maximize the height of this material. So by leaving it as is, that means I'm minimizing my losses. Again, just depends what you're working with. The two different ways I'm going to add it is laying this trim good sides facing, so majority of it is sitting on the top and the area that I'll be adding, and aligning the edge with the raw edge of the top, and then just sewing all the way around. That will end up creating a bit of a seam edge when you unfold it. Now you could do this for the top and the bottom, or like I'm going to do at the bottom, I'm just going to place it exactly on top so I end up seeing the little frill detail. I'll offset it just by a little bit so that I have enough space for the sewing line to sit on top there and attach the trim onto the top. You could do this style for the top and the bottom if you prefer this showing. I'm also just going to overhang it by about 2 centimeters or roughly an inch, just so if I need to hem it, I've got that space there to be able to do a double roll. And then I'm just going to sew it straight stitch about close as I can to that edge, so probably about 1/2 centimeter or 1/4 of an inch off the edge. Now all I need to do is just add this bottom section on. Let's lay this good sides facing up. this also with the good sides facing up. And I'm actually going to pin it in place because I want to make sure that these edges of the top are aligned here and at the other end as well. So laying that lace bit on top, aligning the edge of the front center. Pin that in place. Now it is time to jump over to the sewing machine. I'm just going to pick which way I'm going to sew from. Because it's in the center, either way there's going to be fabric in this area, which is never ideal, but that is life. So once I've got that first bit lined up, I'll just make sure the next bit is overlapping, making sure that I'm catching the bit of lace as well as the bottom piece of the garment. Seeing it done, I'm actually really enjoying it. I was very worried that it was just gonna be like mishmash together and not looking cool. I think it's really cute. It's doing its thing. It's made it a little bit longer. Obviously, it's not gonna be the most groundbreaking length with this little panel. Now, I have one last detail to add on. It's this little frilled edge. It's obviously to help add a little bit of length and a bit of cuteness. And I'm also thinking maybe around the armholes as well. I'm gonna unpick the bottom edge, unravel the seam allowances within there, which is probably like a centimeter or two. We're getting desperate here. And then I'm gonna add this on, which might just be that extra bit to make me feel comfortable with wearing it as a dress. Ultimately, I'm gonna be wearing this as like a little summer number. I'll be in bikinis. I'm also just gonna double fold / hem this edge in line with the existing edge. I feel like we'll just keep it simple. You could literally just go for days adding details on details, frills, little things. You know, it'd be so cute. Like imagine like a little drawstring detail across the top and like some bows hanging down the side. Adorable. Okay, I have officially unpicked that bottom edge and now I've got my little frilled section. So what I'm going to do with this is find the end, and before I attach it on, I'm going to just hem the edges so that they don't fray. So I'll do one fold at about 1 centimeter, a second fold at about 1 centimeter, and then just sew that in place. I could pre-hem both edges to match the width of this area, but to be safe, I'm just going to hem the first edge and then begin attaching this strip, and then I'll just leave a little bit of overhang at the other end and hem that as the last detail. Now that that edge is all hemmed, I'll just lay this down good sides facing, aligning the raw edge or the edge that I want to be hidden in line with the end of the garment so that majority of the strip is sitting on top of the top. And then I'll just sew down there as close as I can to the edge, trying to minimize the amount of seam allowance that gets hidden away, therefore reducing the length that's lost. And then once I sew that in place, I'll just remember to leave that little overhang and do the final hemmed edge. Then I can iron it so it's all nice and flat, and that's done. Once I've created that seam as well, I will go back and zigzag stitch or overlock those raw edges, and that will just prevent it from fraying. I can also push that seam allowance upwards and do a bit of a top stitch so it sits in that direction. That is something that I can do at the center seam as well. If I find that the seam is hanging down and showing itself on this lacy trim, I can iron it upwards and then just do a top stitch so it stays sitting under the garment instead of under the lacy trim area. For some reason, my top is divided into like 3 bottom sections because there's little side splits, which I think is a cute element. I could always join it together if I wanted, but I like that. Now that I've done that first section, I'm going to repeat those steps for the other 2. Here's how it's looking. I'm so obsessed. This is going to be my summer throw over, and I kind of love it how it's like oversized and long with pants, and then also if I take it off, it's like a little mini dress. This is how the little sleeves would look if I added the frill section, but I feel like I'm liking it just normal. I can always add that on later if I want to change it. But how I would do that, instead of adding it good sides facing like I did on the base, I think I would just tuck it under and then just sew over the existing hemline. I'd probably pre-overlock or zigzag stitch the raw edges of that as well, making sure I just join the ends of this strip with good sides facing to create an entire loop. It's like a little baby doll dress. She's very mini, and on a windy day I probably wouldn't just wear her around the streets, but I would feel comfortable wearing this to the beach where I'd be wearing a bikini underneath. Okay, that is simple additions to a button-up top number 1. Let's jump into number 2. I am absolutely going to keep wearing this for the rest of the video now. The two parts of this video is just kind of showing you elements you can add to a button-up shirt just to give it a little bit more character. It's not really changing it or transforming it, but this one is going to be about how to add drawstring features or like gathered features. I think I mentioned earlier I've added drawstring features on the front of a button-up before. I feel like that's really fun. I will still show you how to do it vertically with the tie-up finish at the bottom, as well as horizontally and then meeting in the middle to tie up, as that will be two different methods of how we create the tunnel for the little straps to go through. Hopefully seeing it in the two different ways will just get the mind ticking. I've seen people do it on wavy angles, down the sleeves, wherever you want. This is just showing the basis of how you can achieve it, and then you can run wild with your ideas. I'm going to start with this top because I think it might be the quickest to get done, as I've kind of prepared it. This is actually a top I made ages ago and I just never got down to the finishing detail, which is literally just adding this drawstring effect. So if you were working with a button-up top and you wanted to get to the same point of having a clean center, you could tuck under the area or add a concealing strip of material over the section where the buttonholes and the buttons are, or alternatively you can just embrace the buttons and have them as a feature as well as the tie section. So that's completely up to you. It just might depend on the design of the button-up, how easy it is to fold it away, as the collar might get in the way. So maybe pick and choose your type of button-up shirt that goes with concealing it if that is your goal. Okay, for this one I'm going to go horizontally, and I want to have one go under my bust area and one up the top. I feel like that could be a bit funky, but this top is quite wide, so I have a bit of space to be able to draw it in. That is another thing to keep in mind, the whole thing of the drawstring effect. If you're doing it horizontally, it's better to work with a top that is oversized and you have enough room to draw in, whereas the next one I'm going to be doing it vertically, so therefore I need extra height to be able to pull it up. If you've got a top that's sitting exactly where you want it to be and then you add the drawstring effect, then it's going to be cropped and sitting where you don't want it to be. So just keep that in mind. To create my straps, I have utilized some leftover material of the same material of the top, whereas if you were working with a button-up top, you could find some extra material that either matches the top or go with a contrasting piece of material. Personally, I want my straps to be kind of as thin as possible, so at the end they end up being about 1 centimeter or roughly just under ½ an inch. So my cutting width for the panel would end up being 2 inches, which is roughly 5 centimeters, and that's enough for the amount that will get hidden within the seam allowance as well as it being folded. To get the length of the strip that we'll be cutting out, figure out the area that you're covering and how much extra bow area, maybe from 10 to 17 inches. I think I ended up adding like 17 inches, so that's going to be a very oversized bow effect, whereas if you just want a little bow with a little hang, that would probably be good just to leave it at 10 inches, and that will be your cutting length. And then for the amount of panels you need to cut out, again, it depends on the type of drawstring effect you are creating. If you're just going for the individual area where 2 strings are sitting next to each other and then they tie up at the bottom, you'll obviously need 2 strings for each of those areas that you do. These ones I'll only need 1 string per area, but the goal is to have one opposite each other to be able to tie up, so I'll need 2 strips per area to be able to tie up. That's the straps all hopefully measured and cut out now. To begin sewing that, we'll lay it with the good sides facing up, then fold it in half lengthways so that the good sides are facing each other. Sew along one short edge from the folded edge to the raw edge, and then completely down the length of it, leaving about 1 centimeter or roughly ½ an inch of seam allowance until you get to the bottom, and then leave the other short edge open, as that is where we will push out all the inner material. Now there's a few different ways that you can reveal the good sides outwards. I normally just use like a clean paintbrush or something long and thin like that, and pop it on the closed end and begin to push it through until it reveals out the other side. And that means you should get to the point where I am at. So we've got one raw edge and then one clean end, and they're ready to add into their sections. Now to create the sections, we essentially are going to be adding a panel on the underside of the garment where we thread these straps through. For the singular panels, again, you can utilize similar material to the garment that you're working with if you want it to look all cohesive, or if it is a garment that you're not really going to see it, you can use whatever scrap material you have lying around. I have sometimes used a bias binding just because the edges are normally already folded in and ready to sew in place, so that helps save time. Whereas if you're making your own panel, I would recommend cutting this tunnel panel at about 2 inches wide. That means we have about ½ an inch or 1 centimeter on either side to be able to tuck under and create a clean edge, as well as enough width for us to sew it in place and then be able to put this through. That's the width of the panel that you'll be cutting out, and then for the length of it, it will just be equal to the measurement of the area that we are covering, plus 1 inch of seam allowance. I just generally like to utilize what I have laying around, so I've got this random little ribbony strip. I'm going to utilize this for my under tunnel area. It's definitely going to be pushing the friendship of how much I can squeeze this in there, but at the end of the day, it is material, so it can compress if need be. I'm just going to overlock the side edges so that they don't fray, and I'll show you how we place that in. Otherwise, to properly prepare the tunnel panels, which have been cut out to the actual measurements, begin by overlocking or zigzag stitching all the edges, then create a single fold of about 1 centimeter or roughly ½ an inch down the 2 long edges, and either iron or sew these folds in place. Then we'll be up to the same point. For reference, this is what I'm starting with. I think I'm just going to do the gathering panelled areas only on the front. I could continue this bottom one the whole way around and create a bit more of like a flare on the back, which could be cute, but I kind of like it just being loose. While we're here, I'm just going to mark out the areas. Well, the top one's easy because I really want it to sit right where the collar meets. So whatever that line is across there, that will be my indication. Whereas the next one, kind of like just above my belly button, that could be cute. But then I do like it when the action is around the bust. I think I'm gonna go closer to my underbra section. Let's just ignore this writing on the top. It was scrap material and I wanted the full length. Okay, so this is my front panel. That is the pin I put in place when I tried it on. And now all we have to do is just add this section, which will be the tunnel where the strap sits within. Like I mentioned, this is very thin compared to other ones. A regular panel for this would probably be that wide. This is bias binding, see how the edges are folded in, so we would just lay it down like that and sew on the edges. Very handy. I would use this material is see-through, so you'd end up seeing the green. I'm going to remove my pin and then line this up with the area that I want it. If this was a material that didn't have a pattern like mine, you could always chalk it out, making sure that you're in the area that you want to be. One thing I am going to do is I'm going to tuck under that edge so it meets that seam that's there. That way it'll hide the raw edge. I will do the same for the beginning as well and kind of slightly offset it from the edge because I don't want it hanging over and then revealing on the front. Then what I end up doing is I'm going to sew as close as I can to this edge all the way down, restart my stitch. I'm not going to close up any ends yet because I need them to be open, and then I'll sew as close as I can to that edge, sewing it down so that leaves a gap all the way in the middle for the tunnel. What we should end up is with this tunnel underneath and then there's these two lines on top. And we're going to get a safety pin that is wide enough to fit in the area. I'll then place the safety pin on the raw end of the strap and begin pushing it in from the end where I want the clean end of the strap to hang out. Then I'll just gather the material over the top of the safety pin and then just continue that until I get to the other end, gathering up and pulling that over. This material is very thin and fragile, so I want to be very gentle and not accidentally snap it off midway. Pull it out so there's quite a bit of overhang just so you don't accidentally pull it back through. We can always adjust it later. And then we'll just pull it so that the raw end is sitting kind of just at the end or in a place that we know that it will catch when we sew, and then we'll just sew a line across there to secure the strap in place so then when we do start to pull it down this end, it's not just going to get pulled back out. So then from the other side you've just got this rectangle ending there, and then this is what the drawstring looks like from the front. So you can just pull it in there, gather it up. Okay, now to repeat that for the rest of the sections. A little tip as well, when I was adding in the second lines, I obviously made sure to just lay down the top, match out the placement so that it meets in the middle where I want it to. Again, the grid system really helped, but fabric chalk will be your friend if you need it on plain material. Row 1 is done. That is so cute. I feel like I could just leave it like this. The fun thing about drawstring as well, I've got this very gathered up at the moment, but if I just untie it, and if I wanted it to just be more of a loose fit, ta-da, we have a loose fit. I'm going to live out my dream and do the top as well. I feel like the vision is there and I want to try it. You know, the bottom one was cute, absolutely perfectly fine as it was. I don't know, this one just feels fun. We're just leveling up button-up shirts, and this is exactly what I mean, where it's plain button-up shirt with some jeans, you know, does the job. A little bit of drawstring gathering effect. Literally makes the bird sing. So yeah, this is how we do the single drawstring and then meet at a center point and tie up. If you wanted to do, say, a single line, it is ideal to have 2 strings in the one area so that they tie up at the bottom or wherever it ends. It is exactly the same method, you just have one extra step. So the tunnel panel that we add underneath needs to be wide enough to fit the 2 straps plus the seam allowance. If these are 1 centimeter or half an inch each, I'll obviously need double that plus at least 1 inch of seam allowance. You do the same method of attaching it where you put it in its place, do the fold at the beginning and the end, sew down it as close as you can to either edge the entire length, and then we add one extra line in, which is one in the center, and that's going to divide the space into 2 tunnels for the straps to go through. That just helps avoid the 2 straps getting tangled within that zone. Again, you can mark it out with some fabric chalk, or you could pop some pins in place to figure out where the center of it is. And do the same method of adding the straps in with a safety pin, block it off on the raw edge end. Then you have the 2 straps hanging out of that open end, and you can drawstring it in as much as you would like, tie it up, and that will help secure it in place. I've seen some people do some amazing wavy designs on the sleeves, even like just little middle sections, or like I did, I'm just going to put it down the side just to help pull up the length of a dress. And like I mentioned before, I can then fully pull it out, have the full length available, but then when I want it to be a little bit shorter, I can pull it in. I think that's what's cool about the drawstring. You're adding an element that allows you to be able to have almost multiple garments in one, because it fits differently depending on how much you gather it in. Anyway, I'm genuinely about to run out the door, go home and pack my bags, because I'm going for a cute little weekend with some friends to the countryside and staying in an Airbnb for one of my friend's birthday. I'm going to debut both of these tops there, and now you'll get to see some scenes of me wearing it in action. Thanks so much for tuning in for this video. I hope it all made sense. Hope you enjoyed it. If you do happen to get inspired to create something similar, tag me at the Essentials Club, as I always love seeing your outcomes, or you can always DM me your outcome of your projects if you don't like posting. It makes my day seeing what you create. I'm gonna go wear this out in the countryside. I'll see you in the upcoming videos. Bye!
Baby, won't you save me? Say you want